Welcome to This Life, the Chronicles of Autism Mums, hosted by me, Alison. Each week, I'm joined by amazing women who happen to have autistic kids. Hasna, Moira, Suzana, Reen, Maha, Karina, Huma and Rana, our techie. Each week, we talk about navigating the ups and downs of parenting kids with autism and how that affected us and our lives as women, mothers and professionals. Strap in, grab some tissues. Sometimes you'll cry from empathy and other times from laughter. Join us on our journey of this life. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of This Life, the Chronicles of Autism Mums. And thank you so much, all of you lovely ladies, for joining us this morning for a very interesting conversation about early intervention. So this week, it's to intervene or not to intervene. That is the question. So we are going to be talking about intervention, early intervention, what that means, that explained. And if we went down the route of early intervention for our children, and the positives, the negatives, and perhaps some advice that we can give for our listeners out there. So I think to get started, Hasna, would you mind giving us a brief lowdown on, for any listener who's new to autism or therapies and so on and so forth. Yeah. So if we can have, if you could just explain what early intervention is, that would be a great start, I think.
Yeah. So early intervention is a support and educational program or system that it's like a remediation. It's a skill and a remediation program, because children on the spectrum tend to not learn struggle with learning naturally by observing their environment. So a lot of those skills need to be broken down and taught, but also language, making sure that you can catch them up as much as possible, because the aim of early intervention is to include them as much as possible in the mainstream, or in whatever they need. But because the brain at that age, and early intervention optimally is from 0 to 3. I mean, at 0, I mean, sometimes they start at 10 months, but it's usually before, because that's prime time. I know that studies have shown that neuroplasticity, the brain, you can still, it's almost like when we get in a car, and that's not something we were born knowing, but we do it sort of automatically. Now it's a taught skill, but it comes. So early intervention works on remediating behavior skills, life skills, routines, communication, speech therapy. It's usually multidisciplinary, so it involves different therapies, but the ones that are always a big part of seem to be speech and OT. And then there's the whole ABA controversy, which, but I know that everybody agrees that those are very important. Occupational therapy remediates on gross motor skills, on fine motor skills, movement, sensitivity, sensory. So you're basically giving your child a 360 approach, where you're trying to catch him up, or let's say, again, I like the word remediation, all the skills that he cannot pick up naturally in the environment, in order to include him in an inclusive mainstream system, if that is the right choice for him. Okay. So it's important, because at that age, kids can really come around, can really pick up those skills fast, and then you're setting them up for success versus, just letting them develop at their own at their own pace.
So the reason for the early part of this intervention is basically the fact that within those few years, you're saying that it's a lot easier and for the child, and they develop faster if they have these types of therapies.
Because the brain is developing, still very neuroplastic, is developing, all these neuron connections are happening. And again, I'm not a scientist, but this is the science behind early intervention.
Yeah. Okay. So with that, there is a reasonable amount of urgency then for a lot of parents who understand the fact that early intervention quite possibly could be the best thing for their child that may have a diagnosis or have some delays. So, Karina, did you know about early intervention when your son was diagnosed, or before your son's diagnosis? Because this all kind of fits into, what the path that we chose to take when we realized that our children were delayed or had their diagnosis. So How did you find out about early intervention, and did you receive services for early intervention?
We didn't know about it, anything. Everything came as a surprise. Right after receiving the diagnosis, our pediatrician explained to us about early intervention and the importance of it, and also he suggested us to start as soon as possible. He explained also about the brain plasticity, and he said that it would lessen the symptoms of autism. He said it's not going to cure it, but it's going to lessen the symptoms. But he made sure we understood the outcome would depend on many factors, especially the consistency. So he said, you have to be consistent. We don't know how long this is going to take, but don't stop. So we began here in Qatar with almost daily sessions of speech and OT. And every summer we would take him out of Qatar for daily intensive sessions of speech and OT as well, because he didn't have behavior issues. So it was like daily, every summer we went for 5 years. And we were on this pattern for 5 years. And now if we fast forward, this like 10 years now, I can tell that improved a lot, especially his intellectual ability and of course he reduced the symptoms of autism.
Okay, that's really interesting that you laid those foundations, really. So those foundations were built very very steadily over that period of time. But now you believe that from where he is now was really a lot down to the early intervention that he was receiving. Reen, what about you? What's your experience of early intervention?
Well, basically, when we found out that we had a diagnosis with him, we read up about a lot of therapies and about early intervention. But at the moment, it was like 2010, 2011, back here in Qatar, there wasn't a program set up for children back then. So there wasn't anything that included academics, behavior, social communication, emotional regulation, nothing. And everything was separate. And there wasn't enough support back then as well, support in terms of services. And it was quite difficult to get the whole package. So you as a parent would need to source separately. So we managed to get, because we know that he needs, like Karina said, consistency, and he needs, he can't just do it once or twice a week. He needs to do it like every day. So it's molded in him, right? Because it's like, because for them, everything needs to be taught. It's not something that comes naturally. And if you don't do it every day, it's not a repetition. It's not something that it's going to be, they're going to follow through. But we did manage to get speech for him. We did manage OT for him. We managed to get ABA for him. And this was done every day after school, 5 days a week. And at the same time, because his behavior therapist back then was also his shadow teacher, so she implemented whatever he learned. So she attends his OT sessions sometimes, she attends his speech sessions, she sits in speech sessions sometimes, because sometimes speech we get the speech therapist to do it in school. So she implements whatever he needs in school, and they come back and they do it for another hour or two after school. So for the first 2 years, it was just that. And we had to implement it on the weekend. So then you can see the difference. Then, but you can't just stop there. And then there's the holidays. So every time we go on a holiday, we try to go somewhere where we can have the services as well. But we want to experiment with, different therapists, different approach to see what, how he can benefit from it. So every summer, we either spend some when we go back to Malaysia, it's 2 months of solid, OT. I mean, it's not a rest for him. It's like going to school every day with OT and speech and etc. And then, we spent 2 summers in the US to get a different type of therapy. We spent a summer in the UK to get, a different type of therapy, just trying all sorts of intervention to help him where he struggled most that year. So every year we have a goal. Okay, this year it's speech. So we need to go somewhere where we can get really good speech therapists. So 6 months before that, we do all the planning and we go. We sit in and he does that. This year it's emotional regulation. Where can we do? So we did social thinking in the US. We did, and then we tried CBT. We did all sorts of stuff. So every year there's a goal. So every year where we have our summer, we plan things that we can work on.
Wow, Reen, that's amazing. I mean, it sounds like a massive amount of organization and research that goes on behind that. And
please share what you find, because I'm going through the same, the social emotional, whatever programs you find, please share.
That's the toughest, because it's ongoing.
It's so hard, and it's for everybody, not just for our kids, but imagine our kids going through that. Anyways,
we'll share all of that in the show notes after this.
Reen's feedback on these different types of therapies and things that she's tried as well one day, when we're maybe in a separate episode, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely. We can surely do that. And I think that it takes such a long time to put this research together and obviously to make these plans. So we'll certainly share that. And maybe we can do, like Suzana suggested, another episode on just sharing resources. Reen, just going back to that actually, and just the fact that it sounds like you put a lot of time and effort into providing these experiences and also this level of therapy for your son, and you identify, where his needs are, that particular time, and try and really kind of home in on that. What toll do you think it takes on you as a person, as a mother, to not only be parenting your kids and, doing the day-to-day stuff, but also all of this identification of different areas that need work, but also, just trying to do the research and that pressure that you feel to, because I'm assuming, me as a parent as well, when you identify that your child needs work in certain areas, for want of not a better word, then it becomes a job in itself. So, how do you fit that, and how does that work for you? How do you manage it?
It's super scary, because you think everything is okay, and suddenly something happens and you're like, oh my God, not again. And oh my God, what do I do? Like, you're in a panic mode, because you know that you can't get it here. So where can you get it? And sometimes I know that it's not like I sprinkle fairy dust and he'll be okay, the next day. But you need, in the meantime, while waiting for that service that you are going to try to get him, what do you do? Because everybody's behind, hounding you, you're behind your back, like, this needs to happen, that needs to happen. But, I can't. It's so stressful. It is really, really stressful. And, but my husband is great. My husband, he likes to do research as well. So he takes that burden, part of that, away from me, that, he supports me in that sense. He's like, okay, let's do this, let's try this, and then I will try to execute that. But he does quite a bit of research. So it does relieve some of the stress. But, for me personally, I think I've become more anxious since, all this started, since this journey. I'm a very anxious, and just wanting to get things solved, just, wanting to, find something and to make sure that everybody who's hounding me is happy. And it's just a nightmare sometimes.
It's a lot on you. It's a lot.
Yeah.
Moira, coming to Moira now, because I know your experience of early intervention, Moira, was rather different to Reen's, just in the sense that we've all identified that our children, we would like them to have early intervention, and we all agree that it's a good idea. But based on Reen's situation, which was there were no services, so she kind of, I think, rounded everybody up and there was one session, then another session, and then she managed to bring everybody together so that all of these disciplines were kind of rolled out right the way through his school day. And your experience was different based on the fact that, like me, for my son, you were part of an early a first round of an actual early intervention program that happened here in Qatar, which was to explain that multidisciplinary class, basically. So a school that rolled everything out in like a 5-hour block in a day. So what do you think, the differences were for you emotionally, and also in terms of the benefits to your son?
Callum starting the EI program came quite a bit further down the line. And so at the beginning, we probably started our journey a bit differently, because we didn't start with a pediatrician giving us a diagnosis and then telling us what our route could be. We started early with a health visitor and nursery, just highlighting his lack of speech. So for a long time, we thought he can't speak, he needs speech therapy. And that was pretty much all we focused on, really. And we moved here from the UK. In the UK, we were offered speech therapy, a 6-week block, but then there would be a few months gap, and then you get another 6-week block. So we didn't even get to start that, actually. We came here and immediately started looking for speech therapists, not even aware that he might need any other kind of therapy, to be honest. So it was very much word of mouth, coffee mornings, Facebook groups. Thank goodness for Out of Sync group, Reen. I joined that, and then, just randomly meeting you, Alison, a friend said, oh, I've got a friend who's got a son that doesn't speak. It's like, wow, someone else. So I met this friend at a party, said, you don't know me, but I believe you've got a friend who's got a son. Can I have her number? And then pitched up at your house for a cup of tea, probably blubbed in your sofa, going, I don't know what to do. And from then, you introduced me to the various people who would then head up this EI program. So, and so it was just talking to them that basically we discovered it was more than just speech. And even before that, trying to find a speech therapist is, they're not all equal. You have to try a lot of different therapists to find one that fits. And to be honest, there was one particular one that everyone raved about here. And I thought, got to get to see her, got to get him in quick. We were aware you have to deal with things early, but she was full. I practically sent a begging email, squeezed me in, and she did. And she wanted to see him at nursery, and we get little to no feedback. I thought, what on earth am I paying you all this money for? So even the ones that are supposedly brilliant don't always work for you. We then found another one who insisted on doing sessions at home with us. So she was teaching us with the child. So much better. But yeah, getting him finally into an EI program was a huge relief to me, because it took a lot of stress off me, because the work was being done by somebody else. They had found the therapists. They were figuring out what he needed. I mean, you're always wondering if there's something else you could be doing, but it goes like that. You go for a period of time where you think, somebody else is managing this for me. I can take a breath. And then
I think that's important as well, actually, that, you get that sense of relief. I certainly did when we started Noah in an early intervention program, because you've got people guiding you through that process. And it's such a relief that you feel that, somebody that really actually knows what they're doing, and there's a structure to everything. And somebody is managing that whole multidisciplinary approach to your child's therapy. So, whereas Reen was saying that she, had to manage all of that. And at some points during, when we left early intervention, we've had to do that. And, you really need to be at the top of the game. You really need to be on these people. And I think, if you are employing private therapists, then as Moira said, they're not all the same, and you rely on them to be in the industry that they're in, or doing what they do, their job, because they care. And the majority of them, I would say, do, but they're you really do need to keep a track of what's happening, and you can't just trust them to do a session and then that's it until the next week. And also, we all know the benefits of really working with your child through the rest of the week until they have their next session, so that we can practice all of these skills that have been taught. Maha, what's your experience of early intervention? Because obviously your child is a bit older, when you first came here, and you had a totally different experience, I think.
Yes. So when he was diagnosed, the pediatrician basically gave me a piece of paper with all these numbers on it. I had no idea what early intervention was, although I work in healthcare, so I speak to a lot of health professionals, and I still didn't know what early intervention was. And he just gave me this list, and he just said, just try. And I'm like, try what? And he said, wherever you can get in. So I'm like, does he need speech? Does he need OT? Like, you tell me. And so it was really difficult at the start. So we did end up getting him into an early intervention program, which was about 6 hours of therapy a week. It was 2 3-hour blocks. And it was difficult because in Australia, most of us, we're working, it's, I think, different here in Qatar, where, where we sometimes have the help at home and things like that. It makes it a bit easier to work around therapy. But in Australia, we're all working, and, trying to fit it in was really challenging. And so we were given these 2 3-hour blocks. And I have to say, although we had to wait 6 months, and again, at the time you're in a panic because you hear the word early intervention and you think, I've got to get in early, and you're trying to still work through it. So 6 months later we started, and I have to say it was worth the wait for me at the time, because I really could tell the difference between people that knew what they were talking about and people that didn't, because I'd already sort of, taken him to speech and OT, and they really, the great thing about this program that I did was they spent 2 full days just with the parents. Kids were not there, and just teaching the parents. And it was almost like early intervention for the parents. Like, we need to understand what is going on, because we are of no help. When you take your child to an OT session and then you have to wait 3 days for the next session and you have no idea what to do in between sessions, it's almost useless. But these people were sort of able to say, look, this is why they behave this way. This is what's happening to them. This is what you need to do. This is how consistent you need to be. And they basically drilled it into us for 2 days, saying, you want to do this program, we've got limited time, so we really need you to almost be helping us, be helping us in between with the things that you were doing at home. So I think that really set a good foundation for us, because then when I would go, I went through 5 or 6 different OTs and 5 or 6 different speech therapies, because not everyone fits. And so once I was given that sort of support and information, when I would go and see a psychologist, an OT, whoever, I would then be able to go, nah, not for me, not for us. Or I'd go, yeah, this person understands what's happening. I can trust what this person says. Because again, our time is limited. We don't have 6 months to waste on, I tried that, it didn't work. We need to know in a month or 2, is this okay or not? So I think for me, I was really lucky that I had that. And I if I didn't get into that program, I think it would have been extremely difficult just to work out where I needed to go. So I think, just getting in, do your shopping, get to the right people, and hopefully that'll set you on the right path.
Okay, so rules of engagement then for parents is also very, very important. So not only just to be told about an early intervention program, but how you can, further enhance that early intervention program, because it's not magic, is it? There's a lot of work that goes on. I mean, obviously they do take the lead on things, therapists and that clinical team, but there is a lot of work from the parents' perspective. Suzana, because when did your son join an early intervention program? How old was he, and what were your experiences?
I was just thinking about this, about the age, and I think he was almost 4 at that time. So he had already been doing just therapy for about 5 or 6 months, and I was having an issue with the lack of consistency in the nursery. Although I was in and all of his therapy sessions, And I was communicating that with his teachers and nursery. But because they were such a young age group, I think they had the main teacher and like 4 assistants. And there was like 1 that was consistent with what I was trying to teach, but the rest weren't. So that lack of consistency was creating an issue. So this is kind of where I want to highlight even the kids who are on the milder end of the spectrum at that age really need the consistency. And I think it was a big lesson for me to, I think at that point, I was looking for the ideal situation. And the ideal situation was he didn't necessarily really need to be in an EI program. He needed a setup at a school that had the support system in that, but that was not available. And I struggled with coming to terms with that. And I think my husband also struggled with when EI was suggested. It's not that I necessarily felt he needed to be in that, but because of the lack of consistency that I was able, we weren't able to achieve, I felt like it was the only choice I had. And even like within the first month of him being there, so he was there, I think, for only about 4 months by the end of that school year. The head clinical, like BCBA, came and said, she's like, he's improving, like he's skyrocketing so much that I'm second guessing myself if I made the right recommendation for him. But the reality was that was the only other option to have the consistency of what he needed. And he really did benefit from it. I can't say there's no way, I can't deny that. But obviously it was at a very great cost as well, because again, insurance doesn't cover this. So we had to pay out of pocket. But it's definitely worth it. Like I see the difference in all the therapy and things that we've done with him. So
and it's really interesting actually, Suzana, your perspective, just in the sense that it was a difficult decision emotionally as well for you to take that kind of leap of faith, if you like, and as a mother and as a parent, deep down really what your child needs. And I think it's a testament to you that you identified the fact that you, in a mainstream setup where we are, you couldn't get that consistency that he needed. I mean, so I think there's 2 things there. One, the system is not set up for that here, and also in a lot of countries, but also the fact that you knew what you were looking for. So, and I think this is a really important message to any parent or any caregiver that is listening to this, is the fact that we really do need to understand a lot about our child's condition so that we can kind of really steer it in the right direction and not have any worries about the stigmas that are attached to this, and really just go for it. Because, what would you recommend to parents, if they were in your situation where you're kind of, you've kind of dipped your toe in and that your child might need some additional therapy, but they're not getting what they need from a mainstream environment? Would you do what you've done again?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you have to come to face reality. In an ideal world, maybe a different setup would have, fit him better, would have been, I don't know, less stigmatic, like you kind of said, but it wasn't available. So I had the choice of either doing nothing or just taking the plunge. And I think we did the right thing, because at that age, he needed the consistency, and that wasn't happening at nursery. And he was there all day until like 4 p.m. So he was there more than he was at home. And the consistency was just like, it's the highlight, I think, of this episode for me. It's a word everyone that has used so far. So at that age, it's the consistency, because even though you send them to therapy, you need to continue on repeating and working with them at home for things to progress, So yeah, I definitely would do it again.
Okay, that's really great advice. And Haida and Hasna, I'm going to come to you guys together because your kids are older.
Haida, Huma, you mean? Huma.
Huma, sorry.
I know she has her son's account. But yeah.
Sorry. but I do know your name, Huma, and they both begin with an H. So sorry for that. You guys have got older children, so you really started the ball rolling for a lot of us, just with in terms of the irony of the fact that we're all sat here together, but a lot of the services, and I know Reen, you were kind of pioneering a lot of this as well, but your experiences of early intervention are very different to some of ours, just because the services were not available. So and you perhaps didn't get the early intervention package that some of us did. So what do you think, how do you feel about that now, and how do you feel that that's affected your child and you and your journey?
Well, yeah, it was an uncharted territory at the start. And as everyone mentioned, we had to search and find someone nice, someone qualified to help our child. And we were lucky to find someone who had the time and the expertise to help us. Of course, we did the research, what is required. So our shadow teacher was the ABA therapist who went to school with my son and stayed in school throughout the day, and then came home and did an hour or two sessions. And then, so yeah, it was, I know at the start it was recommended that it's 40 hours a week, but it's, I don't think we did 40 hours a week, but whatever we did, it was a lot. And I was tired, they were tired. I mean, my son was tired. It's just, the good thing is that he had a bond with the therapist, so he looked forward to that. They were like his friends, because at that age, it's difficult to form bonds anyway with other kids. It's just that sometimes when I think about it, sometimes I feel that the most pressure that I felt was not because of the challenges that I was facing at home. It's the external pressure, the expectations that come from, you can say, educational institutes, that or society, less from society. I mean, like, I don't care, I don't have to prove anything to them, but that I remember being told that, oh, you're just containing him. I remember hearing that, that you're just containing him, he's not growing. And I'm thinking, you can't force someone to grow. They're like, a seed grows at its own pace. I mean, a plant grows at its own pace. I can't force changes in him. When he's ready, when he has the required input, and so he will grow. So that's the pressure. I just, in those years, I remember the stress and the pressure that came with that. And he was being forced to do things he was not ready for. Like in a group play, he's supposed to play with a group of friends, and he's clearly not ready for a group session. I mean, he wanted his turn, and he's having a meltdown. So and we're supposed to like ignore the meltdown. We're supposed to exclude him, and so the other kids are playing and he's not. And it was heartbreaking. And I knew in my gut he's not ready to handle the situation. It's traumatic. And I felt that as a parent, at that point, I was like, at that point, you don't say anything because you're like, oh, we shouldn't interfere in the therapy, but it's painful. And then asking you to record your child when he's having a meltdown, it's painful, it's traumatic. Those images, those flashbacks still come to me when he's crying, and you have to record it because you have to send it to the BCBA in another country. And I was like, and then I stopped. I said, I cannot do this at this point. I need to hug my child. He's in pain. I need to be there for him. So, a lot of the therapy, sometimes I would question, like, is this like, it was like military, that I was like, is there no give? Is there no space for me? Like just taking a breather and just giving him a breather. So I just, sometimes I would question all of that. Now when I think about it, those things come back. At that point, you dare not question, because you're like, oh my God, you cannot interfere. You're paying so much, and there's someone more qualified than you who's telling you how to do this, and they're doing it. So So I just, now when I think, I was like, I should have stepped in. I should have said no. There are a lot of should haves. And I sometimes think, does he remember these things? Is he traumatized? I don't think he is, because everything just washes off him. Every day he wakes up newly programmed and fresh. So like all forgotten about yesterday's trauma. So I'm thinking, I hope he's like that, because, one of my middle child, he asked me, like one time he was going to bed at night, and this was like a couple of days ago. He's like, Mom, why doesn't Heather ever get sad? And I'm like, he thinks differently. I said, Suleiman, he thinks differently. You think differently. The middle one is really sweet and sensitive. So he takes everything in. And my son is, the other one is like plastic. You throw something at him, everything just washes off. And, so I'm like, maybe that's a blessing. That it's just, he bounces back. So I'm like, so maybe the trauma is still just limited to me. So, but of course, I don't, I'm not saying the therapies are, they are important, and consistency is important, and we are where we are because of all the time that we spend.
I think it's really interesting, the points that you've made there, Huma, because it just really focuses on the fact that everybody's experiences are different, and everybody parents differently, and everybody, parents are obviously really managing this journey for their child. So you have to trust your gut instinct as a parent as to what is best for your child, because you know your child best. What's your kind of best piece of advice, Huma, for a parent that is in a situation whereby they're about to embark on a therapy journey, and obviously depending on where they are, it might be an early intervention program, or it might be choosing different therapies. Knowing what you know now, what would be your best piece of advice to somebody in those kind of starting phases?
That just don't stress about it. Things do get better if it feels like the end of the world right now, but it will get better. Just trust the process, and just love your child and have fun, and don't be scared to step in when you feel that you've had enough or he's had enough. Don't be just be there for your child. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Huma. And Hasna, how your journey progressed and where it kind of started with early intervention and therapy, and what were your experiences?
I'm just going to say I relate so much to everything that Huma said. In retrospect, it really hits us hard. I'm going through my second child now. I so relate to what you mean, because I've adopted a completely different approach. Again, I am not minimizing the need for therapy, because therapy is essential. And without it, my son is just, I'm not trying to lessen his symptoms or to just not let him be himself, but I need him to be able to function, or to be able to access what he can't access now. Like at the same time, let him be, and this is what I'm doing with my youngest, but give him the tools, because without tools, he's not going to be able to cope. And that's all I want. I mean, that's the thing, having realistic expectations to what your child needs and how he needs them, and not abandon their social emotional side of things, because I know it's funny that you said, does Haider feel sad? And I'm pretty sure he does feel sad, but he has a different way of processing it. And that's the interesting part, is that it's different and we still don't understand it. So for me, I think the biggest takeaway, I didn't get a proper early intervention as in a multidisciplinary and whatnot. I was one of the first families, so we all had some of the same therapists begging for an hour here and there. I mean, ideally, my son would have 1 or 2 hours a day, and that was already a blessing. He didn't get OT because at the time there was no OT, and so the therapist would kind of try to cover multiple skills. It was very, like Huma, it was hard because we had to send videos, and again, and the meltdowns, and the school, my God, the school did not help and it was such an important environment for him and a great place to push the skills, but all you heard was like, oh, the little autistic kid, like, and I would go and have my conversations and whatnot. I remember lingering in the school just to have a look what he's doing, and I would look at him in the playground. I'm talking at 3 years old, and everybody's playing, he's sitting on a bench or walking around in circles, and no teacher is doing anything. Nobody is saying, come, let's, and this is ideally, had this been a school, or in an ideal world, somebody would have prompted him, brought him, tried, but that wasn't happening at all. So in my case, I followed the therapy by the book. I again, sometimes against my own, I did feel his trauma. I did feel that sometimes I put really the heavy expectations on him, and I had to listen, especially the meltdowns. Those, I cannot tell you, I would be very depressed for a couple of days after, especially those big ones. And more than anything, how everybody looked at you, or at your child, like, that mom is, be careful from her, she's crazy, she's delusional, she's aggressive, I kept that front because that was the only way I could advocate for my son. I was scary, and I would throw a tantrum myself, at that point, but this was the early intervention experience. To push a teacher in the classroom was very hard, because the mainstream teacher, would feel like somebody is watching her. And interesting enough, a lot of these schools, had to be like, they had some level of like what the laws, for example, said is like, kids have to be included if they can be included in the mainstream, but that wasn't happening at all, because different private schools got away with that rule. And that's the problem with not having policies. Yes, that therapy that my son received, as hard as it was instrumental in helping him learn and cope over time. We were lucky enough to have some really compassionate therapists. I didn't particularly agree with the program to send videos of difficult moments, but that happened a lot, because we basically are educating the parent at that point, and as it should always be, was the most important thing. So I had to understand what's behind it. It's almost like we all became it's not almost, we all became therapists. I mean, if you know what's going on, you have to understand the science, the vocabulary, you have to understand what's happening, what's behind the behavior. And I think ideally an early intervention would be first and foremost to kind of give the parents, you can't just put your kid and then come back and it's a quick fix, because without the consistency, as both Suzana and Reen said, there's no way that that skill sticks and stuff. And you're, again, giving him a skill doesn't mean you're trying to change him. It just means, like, all kids have a learning process. It just means you're giving him the skills necessary for him to be able to cope. Then there's a whole other story. Do we let him, do inappropriate comments or whatever, or stim in public and all of that? I think all of that should be okay now with what I know now. At the time, I didn't think it was okay, because I was like, oh, kids are going to make fun of him. He's disruptive. He's this, trouble. Oh, don't look weird. And now I'm like, let him, but now I know what I didn't know then. So I think early intervention needs to be a 360. It needs to also take into account the emotions of that child, how he's feeling, how he processes. I don't think there's a perfect program as is, but I do believe that those years are very, very prime to an outcome, to a good outcome. I'm doing it differently with my son now, my second one. I do see that he would really benefit from a rigid program, but I think my whole mindset has changed about it, that I'm like, maybe that time, and he is doing some things naturally, and who will live will see. But as far as I'm concerned, I feel better doing it that way now. And I hope that all early intervention programs take that into account and incorporate parent education, so we can understand our kids and not just be like, oh, that's how we stop this behavior. Why is he doing that behavior? What is he feeling? What's the discomfort? What's going on? We didn't have that. We were like, we just stop the behavior, and that's it. So, but it's not like, for example, stimming has a lot of benefits for them. It helps them, you know what I mean? And we were trying to stop it, but why? We didn't know.
Yeah.
Alison, can you, I know you had I want to hear yours. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, I was just about to ask, actually, Hasna, going through it for a second time, which I'm sure doesn't make it any easier, but you're going through it this time with a lot more experience. I mean, how do you take care of yourself emotionally through this as well? You know, this whole process is very draining, you know, ultimately, even with an early intervention program, and you've got people, you know, kind of partly managing 90% of this, you know, we've been lucky for that. And I'll come on and in a minute after, you know, we've been there and really talk about how parents that don't have access to early intervention can, you know, really, you know, start to help their child. But I mean, emotionally, how are you working through that?
Yeah, I think 10 years of previous experience is very insightful going through it the second time around, only because not only you understand it more, but you accept it. You have a genuine appreciation, or like, I don't even want to say, it's no longer, you've gone through the journey. It's no longer that scary. You know what I mean? You know what they need, you know how and you know what, again, I keep saying I'm very grateful for what I'm witnessing, which is more attention to it, more services, more options, because you have all these parents around the world that are starting businesses, starting communities, starting, you know, so I can see that the world is slowly becoming more accommodating. So that for me is huge comfort to begin with. And then I also can see that my son has really, when I let him relax, he really has come around in so many areas, my eldest son. So when I look at my little son, I say, I just want you to be happy first and foremost. And I want you to be able to communicate. I find that because if you can't communicate, then, so I'm focusing a lot on language. I'm giving a nourishing environment. He does get therapy every day, not crazy amounts of hours like before. Because he's also past the 3 years old, so he's almost 5. So by the time we knew, because he's really, again, he's really on the mild side, let's say. So he escaped various diagnoses until, you know, recently, until the skills weren't coming. But I'm not alarmed like last time. As far as myself, I mean, I've over the years in this healing process, I've adopted mindfulness practices. I have my daily meditation, like I'm very, so the reaction, I didn't allow my past trauma to kind of get in the way this time. It was more, okay, this is what's happening. Yes, it is. Of course, you're going to feel a little, again, but you do have that pull to like go back into victim mentality, victim mode. And, but it realistically is, no, I'm not, it's not the same, first of all and foremost, because I know the journey. I'm educated. I know what to do. I know what he needs. This is not unknown territory for me anymore. So that's how I cope with it emotionally. And also I see the beauty in it. Believe it or not, I see a lot of beauty and some traits that our kids have, like their attention to detail, their thoughts that come, you know, and Omar he's a joy to watch how he functions, how he is, and why would I change who he is? So because to fit him into a society that I don't even like, you know, like the construct and all that stuff, I'm not even convinced with like the values of our, so, you know, let them be and run, you know? Yeah.
Very, very, very fair points, I think, especially considering the state of the world as we are in now. Final thoughts, ladies, just for our listeners.
You didn't tell us about you.
Well, I mean, my early intervention journey with Noah was very interesting, I think, just in the sense for us. And looking back now, I think it was very traumatic. I don't look back at those first few years with any warm feelings or fuzzy feelings. I look back on it as a real sprint to find panic find services. And I think a lot of what Moira was talking about in terms of, you know, finding good therapists, and we had no measure. We had no idea that a speech therapist could be, you know, like a good hairdresser or not a good hairdresser. And it really depends on the fit, but it also depends on, you know, the different level as to how they're educated and what they know. And I think, you know, we've had access to global speech therapists and occupational therapists, just for the fact that we are in this melting pot here of, a lot of people being here from a lot of different countries. And it really surprises me, actually, that some of the what should be more advanced Western countries are actually not providing the level of expertise that other countries are in terms of their training of these therapists. But again, it's very, very difficult to measure their capability and whether or not they are suitable for your child when you've only got yourself to, you're the interviewer, you're the boss, you're the people that are in, paying these people and giving them a job. So I found much relief in the early intervention program that we were lucky enough to be part of when it was pioneered here, because I knew the clinical director. I knew that she knew what she was doing, and she gave me great confidence in the fact that she was able to figure out what his needs were and direct therapy, and also to be very honest about who was the best fit. We had a choice of therapists, and it was really who was the best fit for him. So I had a mother figure, if you like, a fit, like I had somebody looking after me and saying, well, do you know what, these are your options. I think this is a good option. We talked about it, and it really gave me a lot of comfort and education and knowledge and choice. And I think choice is really important, because sometimes you see these people working, and I'm not generalizing at all. This is just from our experience, in the sense that you've got a speech therapist who just reads a story to your child, and then that's done, a 45-minute story and a few questions. Or you've got somebody who does more than that and comes back to you with more. I always remember those, thinking, what is happening here? I don't understand the benefits and the point. But I was too frightened to ask those questions, because they're the person that should know what they're doing. So I think, coming back to Huma's point, and also Hasna's point as well, about asking questions, questioning what you're doing in your gut, in your heart as a parent. Your child best. So, when things are not right and they're not maybe going in the right direction, or you do not feel comfortable with something, I think in hindsight, I didn't do enough of that, because I wasn't confident enough in myself. And I was so panicked that if I lost that therapist, or, I remember having a conversation with Hasna one day about a particular therapist, and I phoned her in tears, because I literally just had enough of how the interaction was happening, and, various things that were happening. And I just phoned her and I was like, I think I've just fired the speech therapist. But it wasn't, and it wasn't just them, it was me, and it was my emotion. It was I needed to get things done quickly, and things weren't happening as fast as I wanted them to be. I think at the start of the journey, and also because my biggest issue with my son was communication, and it still is now. And, you can't fix that, but you have this high expectation for those therapists as well, that they're just going to come in and they're just going to fix everything. And, sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. It just depends on, it depends on so many factors. So I think really for me, if I went back now, I would manage my expectations of the situation. I wouldn't be so panicked. And I would also, really listen to my inner thoughts on this, and, really use my feelings as a measure as to whether or not these were right. This therapist, or, what they were doing were right for my child. And I think that we are all in quite a privileged position here, in the sense that we have had at least some access to therapy. And when, Moira was talking about her experience in the UK before she came here, there were blocks of therapy that were available, but nothing is available in terms of insurance, apart from, obviously it's mandated in the US, but there's not a lot of other insurance in the rest of the world, I believe, that covers autism and, delays and so on and so forth. And also there's a lot of people that are going to be listening to this that don't have access due to geography as well. So, just as a final thought, ladies, what's your best piece of advice for parents that are struggling to get consistent therapy due to the financial impact of this, because it's a huge weight in terms of, if you're paying for it yourself, and if you're not, and you're on a health service and they're providing you inconsistent therapy, or due to geography you are not able to access the therapies that you would like, or a full intervention program, what would be your best piece of advice kind of moving forward, and how parents and caregivers can best help their children in these sort of situations? Because I would imagine it's very, very frustrating when you haven't got access.
I mean, I think the best thing you can do when you don't have a lot of options is literally learn and educate yourself.
It's not really about what they can do. It's more of like, try to figure out how to calm yourself and to take care of yourself. First and foremost, just because when you're in a better place, you'll be able to deal with things in a better way. And I think, just like that saying, when you know better, you do better. So it goes back to what Hasna was saying with like learning and trying to educate yourself, but also be forgiving. Like, we're not robots. We learn and we make mistakes, and we have our good days where we can implement what we're learning, and you're going to have your bad days where you're just going to be like, you know what, forget about all this, and you just want to kind of rest a bit. So, I mean, just be forgiving and kind to yourself.
Okay, that's a really, really wonderful piece of advice, actually, Suzana. Just we should all take a leaf out of your own book. If I'd have gone back 10 years, then I think that would have been a really, really nice thing to hear for me, because it all goes back to the fact that, as parents, and as generally the force behind a lot of the direction and the choices that we make for our children in these situations, then we aren't kind to ourselves. And I think you're absolutely right that we all make better decisions when we can just take a moment and breathe and really think about the direction that we're going in. And I'm sure it's better for our children as well. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been as always a wonderful conversation. I'll just add to that if there is any listener out there that's looking for more information about autism and its related disorders, then this podcast is actually brought to you by learnautism.com. So please take a look at our website, www.learnautism.com, for more information about autism and all of the things that we're talking about in this series. So you can find this podcast wherever you download your favorite ones. Please be sure to give us a rating. We'd love to hear from you. Give us a rating and a few comments. You can also find us on Instagram, so check the link below in the chat. And you can also watch this podcast rather than listen on our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/learnautism. And also the link is below on here. And thank you for joining us, and we will look forward to seeing you all next week for the next podcast. Have a great day, everybody. Take care.